Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Resident Evil review. Now, this review was very hard to do, but this was a review I feel like I had to be truthful about each category that I review under. So, this is an honest as can be review without being too brutal. Because I do genuinely love the game, but there was just so much with this game that it was just so hard to get past the love for it and being honest for this review. So, with that said, again, I am not saying like with this review, it will be like, don't play this game even though I love it, or do play this game regardless of whether I like thought honestly it was a good game. So that is just the forewarning I want to provide before you guys are like watching this review and understanding why I rated it the way I did. So with that said, if you are new to my review system of games, as this is kind of how I usually review my games, I do like an evaluation based on categories, and this is something that I've actually researched. And this is what actual game testers kind of evaluate. A lot of it is intermingled, so it's kind of hard to keep it separated, but I do try my best. So we do story, graphics, music, characters, controls, and gameplay. Obviously, the gameplay is kind of hard to do because I've already done a walkthrough for it. So if you want to kind of see what the gameplay is like, definitely check out that walkthrough. So with that said, also, as another warning, because I do this for every review video, I am going to be mentioning spoilers, so you are warned that there are spoilers that will be mentioned in this review if you're wanting a non-spoiler review. Don't watch this one or wait until after you watch the walkthrough or play the game to watch this review. So with that said, our first category, story. So the story is dependent on who you play as. So you can pick either Jill Valentine, the very intellectual lady who has a beret. I think it's how it's pronounced, a beret. And or Chris, well, technically, or Chris, who's kind of this tough guy, honest but tough kind of guy. And they're at the Spencer mansion because one of the rooms has the Spencer's crest, and they're a very big, influential family in the city of Raccoon City. So there is that. There is also this exploration of the tyrant virus, which is what we encounter with these creatures like the Hunters, the Crimsons, the Plant 42, the tyrant himself or itself, whatever it identifies as. And it also kind of brings an origin story of how this all started into a sense, aside from like obviously Resident Evil 0, sorry. So it's a lot of backstory, it feels like. And it also introduces this conflict between STARS, which is a part of the Raccoon City police force, and Umbrella, which we don't really get into, but it is kind of mentioned that there is a conflict between the two, and they are more of a company that pays people to do stuff for them, including Wesker, who was working for them before working for STARS and being in charge of the unit that Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield work for. So what are the pros and cons for this part? Well, obviously, I love the story choice. Being able to choose who to play as, because then it allows you to experience from a different perspective of, okay, what is the difference. So that was a pro that I really, really loved. And it was also not your typical zombie or horror genre or cliches. Like, it actually was kind of a breath of fresh air because I've watched like The Walking Dead, the Zombie Land even, and stuff like that. And it's just because I don't really touch the hardcore horror genre stuff because I'm a scaredy cat. But it just didn't feel like your average cliche or just nailing like the cliche to a point where it was just like I'm gone. So that was another pro I really liked. And the last one was the exploration to uncover the truth. Like, they show rooms in red of where you've been and where you've not been. um like shading it with green or red. Red means it's not 100% explored, green means it has been. So it really provides an opportunity for players, especially new players, to make sure that they've explored where they need to, that it's been fully explored, and it allows you to uncover the full story of what happened at this mansion. Some of the cons: there's not much difference in the story choice. A lot of the puzzles are the same. The only difference is some of the stuff that you do in the game isn't the same, and you have different helpers. There is also a gender bias. So when we played as Chris versus Jill, Jill can play the piano, Chris can't. Chris can fight Plant 42, Jill can't. So it's just kind of this gender bias that it was so hard to not really think about it and be bothered by it. Um, as someone who's new to the series and has never played a Resident Evil that I can remember, because I was a little Lee when a lot of these games were coming out. And the only one that I remember was with my aunt. It was kind of like an arcade-esque game that wasn't really a part of the main series. So this one was like my very first Resident Evil that I was getting into. And just the gender bias in this game, even though they didn't change the story or, make minor revisions, it still bothered me. But then again, this game also originally came out in 1996, so there was not this consideration of this type of stuff in games back then. So that is something to also kind of remember as well, is they weren't trying to change the story of the game at all, but it would have been nice to see Chris being able to play the piano, or Jill be able to use like her weaponry against the Plant 42, or even just finding a way to use the virus to combat against Plant 42. So that kind of just felt defeating of, being able to fight the mini bosses and stuff for the game, especially if it's supposed to help you build up and be considerate of how you use your resources when you face off against the tyrant at the end. The other thing too that was kind of a con for me, and I will explain why in a moment, but there is no objectives. Like, it doesn't tell you, hey, head to da da da. This game series really makes you make like choices of what your objectives are in the game. It doesn't tell you, hey, you need to find this in order to get the keys for the house to explore the mansion, or go explore the mansion. You're just pretty much told, and it really is difficult to know what you're doing as a new player when you've never played the game before. And if you are watching this review because you're trying to figure out how to play the game, you're not the only one. Like, people have said, and I've even had to, have said that in order to play this game, in a lot of the older Resident Evils, you need a walkthrough, which I had to use a lot of walkthroughs, but there is also one other source that nobody I think has really heard of, and it's called Evil Resource, which is dedicated to Resident Evil. They have the OG Resident Evil games along with the remastered versions as well. So it will tell you where to find things, what should be in there, based on also difficulty too. So definitely go check them out. Their resource was very valuable, very helpful, especially when I was trying to 100% the game. And didn't intentionally mean to with Jill, but since I was successfully doing it, I was like, might as well. So we 100% with both Chris and Jill. So that said, I had to give it a rating of 7 out of 10 because it does give off that B movie vibe. If you know, you know. But B movie vibe, and it's still got a good story, just with like the gender bias and the other difficulties that made it really hard to like navigate the story altogether. Just really difficult, but it's still a good story, so that is why it got a 7 out of 10. Now, graphics. As you can see, I chose a scene to kind of show what it was like in 1996 and what it is now, with the remastered edition from 2015. The graphics are pretty much from the original, except they put more in depth versus like a retro-esque style. Because retro is what the 1996 version is pretty much nowadays, but is considered retro. And that was when it was launched in 1996 again. And it's also providing kind of a new experience for the game and being able to immerse in the game, because a lot of the popular and easier ones, like Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil, I think it was Resident Evil 7 is Biohazard, and then Resident Evil 8 Village. Um, those were very, very, very easy to get into, easy to immerse into, and provide like an experience for like a new player who's never played any of the Resident Evil games. However, if you're someone who's playing this game and it's your very first Resident Evil, like, you still get that new experience like you would with the newer games. So that was just like eye-opening into a sense. And they've been working on remastering. They've remastered up to 4. So the games are kind of a new experience from the OG retro-esque games from back then. So what are some pros and cons? The different experience. Like, there are very noticeable differences. It's a different experience, I think, altogether. And the in-depth. Like, I love all of that. Love it. Love, love, love. However, the cons were the shading. Like, especially when camera angles change, which we will talk about that in a different category. It just seemed to be like too dark for my preference. And there was no way to bump, I think, the graphic brightness up, or if I did, I bumped it all the way up and it still felt like it was too dark. So some of the shading just kind of felt way too darker than it needed to be. It is understandable. It's supposed to be like a horror game that is supposed to be scary and stuff and darker, but sometimes for those of us that are trying not to strain our eyes because we wear prescription glasses or something like that, it's just really hard on the eyes when we have to really focus on the graphics to be able to see things, especially if we're trying to find like items in the game because we missed something in the room and we're trying to 100% it. So like that was one con. The other con was, and I know it sounds weird to say, but the different outfits. Like, you would pick an outfit to use for the game, and it was shown in most of the cutscenes, except the ending cutscene. And I'm like, okay, so if I chose this outfit for the game that was also part of the game in the OG with like, when you beat the game, you unlocked an outfit and there's like different endings, so each ending gives you a different outfit. I get this outfit, and I'm not even allowed to have it in the ending cutscene or even to be able to choose it for the character I don't play. So that was another con, because that was something I felt like it took away a choice I made and didn't even get a voice in it. It was just like, hey, we'll allow you to have it for most of the game except for the ending. Sorry. Like that's just defeating altogether. So, despite those minor cons, I gave it a 9 out of 10 because they've really brought their A game, well, A plus game, I should even say, for when they were approaching the graphics for the game. If they had fixed the shading and stuff, this would be one of those rare times I would be like, yeah, 10 out of 10. But we're going to give it a 9 out of 10 for that reason alone. Next, music. So music was kept from like the original Resident Evil, but with revisions. And the three people that were working on this one, I believe, or made the original possibly, was, or from the original in the 1990s, was Masami Ura, Makoto Tomozawa, and Akira Kaida were the ones that were part of the Capcom sound team for the Resident Evil 1 Remastered, I believe. I was able to find images for both Mr. Uda and Mr. Tomozawa, but I do not know about Akira Kaida. So that was someone I couldn't find an image for. But those are the composers and people that worked on the Remastered, I believe, and did a phenomenal job. Like, guys, you gotta quit using classical music to sway my influence on ratings. It's cheating. So, with that said, here's pros and cons. So it changes based on what's occurring. So, like, if you're, come across a zombie or something, or there's like an intense mini boss moment, you will notice when the music changes. But when you're exploring each area, it has like a different type of music that's calm and kind of gives that go ahead and explore vibe. But it also, like, each of them add like a creepy, eerie atmosphere to it, which really helps enhance the game experience. And like I said, you guys got to quit using classical music, because I love classical music. As someone who used to play the violin, it's kind of my kryptonite. So, another con, I have to give them credit for when they use classical music, because not a lot of games use classical music nowadays. And it just, there's a difference when it's classical music versus non-classical. Music cons, it can be very intense with the music that sometimes you just had to lower it or turn it off completely because of a mini boss fight or something like that. The other thing too, and this is my gripe, because there should be a streamer friendly mode for this game, and there's not. So one of the songs that is played that I muted because I did not want to risk copyright was Moonlit Sonata. And that was in one cutscene. Now, as you guys know, I have turned the background music off completely. And I do not know if it's part of the sound effects sound. But I turned the music off completely and it still played the piano music to where I had to mute it. Now, I would not be against it, except for if you are planning on streaming, because I am a content creator and I do stream games like this. It really makes it difficult when we don't know if the music is going to be causing a copyright infringement. And we turn the background music off, because it's supposed to turn music off and it's not turning the music off. So, that was just something that really bothered me. So with that said, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Like, the music was phenomenal, but those cons alone just really, really hurt the rating, in my opinion. So that is why it got a 7 out of 10. Next, characters. Now, characters are very dependent and are slightly different through each playthrough. For example, if you don't save Richard, you don't really get to have that one scene with him before he perishes. And who survives is also dependent on the choices that you make, especially for Barry and Rebecca. Now, Chris and Jill are also determinant based on if you find them and you release them before leaving the facility in Resident Evil. Unfortunately, and one thing that's still kind of unresolved is Wesker. Like, he gets pretty much knocked out by the monster. We don't even know if he is alive or not. I mean, apparently he is because he's in another game. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Some that, you know, I might find out as I continue to play in chronological order to an extent. So with that said, here's some pros and cons. And I will get to the cons in a moment, but first the pros. So you have little helpers as each character, which is nice because let's say you get into a tough situation that you can't handle on your own, your helper is there for you. They're not like, hey, can you help me find this? But like, you know, with the piano situation, they come in when you need someone who can play the piano. There is also Barry, like or Rebecca, I believe, that will help you out of danger when you forget to put the broken shotgun in the room in the like secret study. So like that was one of the cons I really enjoy, and the personalities of each character was really thought out. It was always with intent. Another con was Barry. Okay, I know Barry betrays us in the game when you play as Jill. He is not the good Barry like the one from Alan Wake. But this Barry is so helpful, very helpful when you're playing as Jill. And he is the one that leaves you notes as you're exploring the mansion. But he also is the one that like has a lot of character growth. And I mean, each of the characters have character growth in some aspect. We see it a little bit with Rebecca when she offers to help set the self destruct sequence before you leave the facility, so you don't have to do it. However, there are a lot more cons than pros for this part. Rebecca. Where do I even start with Rebecca? She is this kid that we randomly find in this house, but she isn't shown in the Jill playthrough. It's only when you play as Chris. And she's supposed to be Chris's helper, and she's always asking, hey, do you need any healing? Hey, do you need this? Like, she's got this grating voice, which kind of goes into the voice acting a little bit, but this grating voice that I'm just like, no, I don't want to listen to this voice. Please, please end my misery. And we don't really get much aside from her willingness to help. There's nothing fishy about her. There's no even logical explanation of why she was even there in the first place, because she's not part of the Spencer family that I'm aware of. And she was randomly found by Richard, and Richard randomly got put in the shark tank area which could have been by Wesker, but who knows if Rebecca is even working with Wesker or not. Like, she could be feigning to help Chris and being naive and innocent. So it just seemed like we don't really know much about Rebecca, and she's still this shroud of mystery with very little character growth. So that was a con. The voice acting. Like I said, the grating voice of Rebecca, and just a lot of it just was very irritating sometimes to listen to. Uh Again, I know it's a B movie rating, but it was just sometimes irritating to listen to some of these voices. Um Another thing too is they use, from what I could research, very limited. I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe they also use the same voice actors or the same voice acting from the original game, which it would have been nice to have that remastered too, maybe with the voice actors coming back into the studio if they're able to. But it is also very possible the reason the voice acting is quote unquote better is we have technology now where we can edit audio and make it sound better. Um, but it still was kind of a con for me. Diaries of characters. We never run into any of the other characters except for like Lisa, Trevor, and Jessica Trevor in a sense. We never really know where Trevor, um, George Trevor is, or any of the Spencer family whose house we were in and stuff. Like, they're an influential family of the city, and we don't even know where they're at, or if they're okay, because they were in the sense the ones to cause all of this, and we don't even know where the researcher team is. So like there's a lot of missing characters, so that kind of plays into like the diaries of the characters that we found, the Spencer family, uh and stuff. So like I know like some of them could have succumbed to the tyrant virus, but at the same time there should have been something to indicate if some of them even made it out alive or were able to get to safety. So that was like another question that was left unanswered. And then lastly, that was a con for me, was Umbrella. We don't even really get a Umbrella villain. We just get someone who's corrupt within stars. That was using basically Wesker. And him admitting that he got a paycheck since basically before he joined Stars. And like we don't even get to know much about Umbrella except for the little bit that we did with finding out Wesker was the traitor. And Barry was potentially a traitor, but only because he was being threatened by Wesker to protect his family. We don't even get really that same thing with Rebecca. So I have to give it a 5 out of 10. I'm sorry, the characters, they still need a lot of work. They still need a lot of work. And if all that were to change, I would probably bump it up to a 7 or an 8. But until then, it's a 5 out of 10. Controls. So I only showed the setup for Xbox, but in this case, it looks like Xbox 360. Yeah, Xbox 360. So, the controls, there's like an alternative, an original. Alternative is the one I believe I used. Yeah, alternative is the one I used for the game. There is an original, which is like the original controls from when it was first released, which was way before Xbox even came out. So it's one of those games that requires a lot of um I think a lot of like depending on your experience and when you even played this game. If you're a new player, I would recommend leaving it on alternative, and they give you different types for alternative and original. If you're a veteran and you've played this game when it first like originally came out and stuff, or had played it from the original edition, you might like original possibly. And not only that, but it allows you to choose if you want to do is um have vibration come from your controller, which like helps when like the rock falls and is chasing after you and stuff like that. Or leaving it off. There's also the defensive items that you can make it manual, or you can say, yes, use this automatically. So that's kind of one of the cool things is you can set up your controls. So what are some pros and cons for this? Well, choice. We love choices. It allows, you know, a better experience when you're able to have a choice and know what your controls do and what is more comfortable for um your preference. And it's also like a good news for newer or veterans of the series, because if you're newer, you're going to want to like go with the alternative, but if you're someone that has been a part of the series since the beginning, you're going to want the original controls possibly, because that's just what you were used to when you first played it. So it's a very good news for both types of players. Some of the cons. It's kind of confusing to set up because sometimes you're like, well, alternative would mean different, so I want original, and that's what I accidentally did. And then the controls were so confusing, so hard. I was like, I need something different. And I was able to swap it to alternative, and once I did, it was just a lot easier, a lot better overall. And the fact that there is a lot of choices, like the different types of alternative and different types of original, um, felt very overwhelming and took more time. Time that you can't really get back in the game. So it kind of was sad to have to do all of that, but you can do it from the, um, I believe, from the main titles settings area. The only problem is you can't really test the settings out unless you play the game. And then when you do play the game, it adds to your time towards completion, which is kind of sad at the same time. So, I gave this a 6 out of 10 for that reason alone, just because the controls should be easy to use and easy to navigate in setting up, and when it's not, um it's kind of sad because it's like, well, I want to do XYZ, why can't I do this? And so it makes it very frustrating for a new player to kind of navigate the controls. So that is why it got a 6 out of 10. Gameplay. Obviously, as you can see, there's like different camera angles, and I'm just like showing like, you know, the gameplay where Chris is getting caught by a crimson, Jill is going down the stairs uh towards the medicine room. So it's got those two different angles, and if you want to see more of like what the gameplay is actually like, you can go to either Chris or Jill Valentine walkthrough. It'll show up somewhere on the screen, possibly, or you can look under the playlist collection of game walkthroughs. But as you can tell, like the gameplay itself is pretty decent, um, despite the other factors. So, what are some of the pros and cons? Um, Before you even start the game, if it's the first time you're playing, because it'll go to the first time player menu when you launch the game. in a way, it helps set up a difficulty for new and veteran players. Veteran players will automatically know, but if you're a new player, it actually asks you a different amount of questions, or I think one question to determine what gameplay will be best for you. The first option is for very easy, the second option is for easy, and then I think normal is the last option before you can play any harder difficulty. You have to go through one of those playthroughs to unlock all options. The exploration, like I said, there's a lot of exploration and being able to 100% the game basically and kind of navigate resources depending on your difficulty. The scarcity or the being plentiful is another pro, I feel like, because depending on your difficulty obviously is going to determine how much resource you have. But when I played very easy, you guys could see I got a lot of healing items that I didn't even necessarily have to use a lot of. And the reason I did it on very easy wasn't just to complete the game on very easy, but to uh, have an easier time explaining the game without dealing with a crimson or a non-crimson coming after me. Some cons. Camera angles. Where do I even begin with the camera angles? Well, let's just say that they were atrocious. Atrocious. And while I love the story and the game so far, the camera angles are an absolute nightmare. I've known friends who've had to quit this game because the camera angles were that atrocious. That was something that I felt should have been fixed in this game, especially if you're going to remaster it, because for some of us, we did not grow up with fixed camera angles. And the fixed camera angles takes a lot away because then we can't really look and see if we get an object, because sometimes objects are missed because of the angling of the cameras and not being able to adjust that angling. One of the rooms that I can think of as a prime example is uh right before the snake room with Yawn, where you get the last, yeah, the last mask. um there is like a defensive item in that room, but it's in a cabinet that you can't even look at the cabinet at all, and you just have to kind of like re-explore the room in order to find it. uh or when you're going down the stairs towards the medical storage area and that camera angle changes, where you'll be going downstairs one moment and then it'll think you're trying to go upstairs the next. So that was another issue with the camera angling. And then another one was the crimson and zombies, as I like to call them. I don't know what the non-crimsons are called, that are zombie crimsons. But I'm just calling them zombies. Um, the differences between the two just didn't seem like, like with the OG, like obviously you could tell the difference retroask wise, but when we look at the crimson and zombie, like there isn't really that much difference except their skin is more crimson and their nails are changed and stuff, and it's just, I was expecting kind of more for things like that. So with that said, this got an 8 out of 10 because, like I said, the gameplay is really good with the other components. It just could be better without that camera angling and maybe like the zombies and the crimsons having kind of more differences. The other thing too with the zombie and crimsons that I forgot to mention was the capability of opening the doors or not opening the doors or being able to push things. Like, didn't seem consistent as well in the gameplay. So overall, based on the categories with the 7 out of 10 for story, 9 out of 10 for graphics, 7 out of 10 for music, 5 out of 10 for characters, 6 out of 10 for controls, and 8 out of 10 for gameplay, is a 42 out of 60 for my scoring, which is 7 out of 10 reduced, which is 70%. So that is kind of like the game is okay, could be better for a remastered game. The game is okay, and I still recommend playing it, especially if you're new to the series. Uh, and with that said, tomorrow I'll be playing the start of the alternative ending for Bioshock. So definitely come check that out. And reminder that this one will be set to an 18 plus rating for the next walkthrough, just because of the alternative ending kind of being more grotesque. As I recorded the first episode on Thursday, and that, yeah, that episode, I do recommend for those that do watch it, your discretion advised. But I hope to catch you guys in the next video or the next review. And as always, stay safe, everyone.